Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I will be discussing the United Kingdom science fiction thriller film Last Sentinel. Spoiler ahead. Watch out and take care. By 2063, human actions have severely damaged the planet, causing a significant rise in sea levels. As a result, most of Earth is now submerged, leaving only 2 continents. These remaining continents are engaged in a war, fighting over limited land and resources. In the midst of the sea between these continents, there exists a military outpost called the Sentinel, where a crew of 4 soldiers is becoming increasingly frustrated. Despite serving for 2 years, their contract ended 3 months ago, and they are still awaiting relief personnel. With food supplies running low, Cassidy and Sullivan, driven by the stormy conditions, decide to attempt fishing. Surprisingly, their efforts yield positive results as they manage to fill their large net with an abundance of catches. Meanwhile, their leader Hendrix notices the intensifying storm and asks Baines to secure the large explosive protecting the Sentinel. As the waves grow bigger and more violent, they start affecting the outpost's pipelines. Baines hurriedly attempts to fix them but gets his hand trapped, struggling underwater for a few minutes before managing to free himself. Outside, the waves snatch away the fishing net, causing Cassidy and Sullivan to lose their entire catch. Sullivan tries to grab something again, but the increasingly strong and dangerous wind forces him to rush back inside to safety. Fortunately, everyone returns just in time before a colossal wave strikes the structure, causing it to shake and allowing water to enter through every opening. Despite the impact, the Sentinel remains standing once the storm subsides. The following morning, the group gathers to discuss ways to conserve their resources while having military rations for breakfast. Baines expresses his frustration about the lost fish, leading to a heated exchange with Sullivan, who blames Baines for taking kitchen parts to fix the main pipes. Hendrix intervenes, reminding them to act maturely and focus on the repairs. Baines questions why they haven't urged for a faster arrival of the relief crew, but Hendrix explains that the telegraph is solely for reporting purposes. Later, Sullivan uses the telegraph to send the daily report, stating that there have been no notable incidents. The response from the base confirms that there have been no significant events there either, as has been the case for the past few months. Sometime later, Sullivan joins Hendrix outside and they share a light-hearted moment, joking about their air dancer, before Sullivan uses binoculars to observe the sea. To their surprise, Sullivan discovers a ship approaching, this confirmed by Cassidy when she checks the radar. Sullivan becomes elated, assuming it to be the relief crew at last. However, Hendrix remains cautious and instructs Baines to gather some weapons in case the approaching ship turns out to be the enemy. Cassidy attempts to establish communication with the ship but receives no response. Despite the uncertainty, Hendrix decides to give the ship a chance. He hands Sullivan a gun and instructs him to take the boat and investigate the ship, ensuring there are no potential threats. Sullivan wastes no time and sets off, approaching the ship while calling out to any possible passengers, yet there is still no response. With his gun at the ready, Sullivan steps onto the ship and begins his investigation, growing increasingly disturbed by the evidence he finds. The objects are coated in dirt, the radio fails to function, and there is untouched food in the cabinets. Despite Hendrix attempting to contact him for a status update, Sullivan ignores the communication as he discovers 4 bags intended for their crew. It becomes apparent that this was meant to be their relief crew, but something unfortunate happened to them, leading to their disappearance and the missed opportunity to return home. As Sullivan remains unresponsive, Hendrix assumes that he was attacked, fueling his desire to shoot the ship before it can approach the Sentinel outpost. Hendrix asks Cassidy for one of the keys to the explosive, reminding her that it's the established procedure. With both keys in his possession, Hendrix begins the process of activating the explosive. However, just before he prepares to shoot, he makes a final attempt to contact Sullivan. Thankfully, Sullivan responds, leading to the cancellation of the attack. Nevertheless, when Cassidy requests her key back, Hendrix informs her that he will keep both keys as a punishment for her hesitation in obeying orders. Subsequently, Sullivan tows the ship to the Sentinel outpost, while Hendrix proceeds to investigate it. Meanwhile, Sullivan and Cassidy reunite, finding solace in each other's company and sharing intimate moments to overcome the fear they had just experienced. A few hours pass, and as the team takes a quick iodine bath, Baines shares the items he managed to salvage from the ship. He is convinced that this was indeed the relief crew, and he notes that the ship's engine hasn't been functioning for months. Sullivan expresses his desire to send a message to the base, but Hendrix prohibits it until they gather more information. The situation doesn't make sense to him, and he considers it unusual to qualify as a significant event. The crew grows tired and suspicious of Hendrix's behavior, especially after realizing he now possesses both keys. After the shower, Hendrix examines the ship's navigation history and meticulously records all the coordinates, which he brings back to the Sentinel to plot their journey on a map. Meanwhile, Cassidy and Sullivan discuss their curiosity about the state of the world beyond their 2-year confinement, as they haven't witnessed it firsthand. Sullivan confesses to secretly sending a message without Hendricks' knowledge, ensuring they will receive a response the following day. The next morning, Hendricks discovers his 3 soldiers suspiciously gathered near the telegraph, and Baines eventually admits the truth. While Hendricks intends to reprimand them, the telegraph suddenly receives a reply. The group becomes excited, only to discover that it is the exact same message Sullivan sent the previous night. They finally realize that they lost contact with the base long ago, and the computer has been automatically sending back the no events message Sullivan sends daily. As Hendricks continues working with the map coordinates, Baines starts secretly sneaking into the ship with a plan in mind. One night, Sullivan catches Baines returning from the ship, but Baines refuses to provide an explanation. The duo, now inebriated, spends time drinking together, and Baines opens up about his family and the uncertain fate of their home. Suddenly, Baines reveals his belief that he can repair the ship. Filled with excitement at the possibility of escape, Sullivan rushes to share the news with Cassidy, asking her to join him in living together in one of the few remaining safe towns on the continent. However, Cassidy is hesitant and finds it difficult to believe what she's hearing. The following day, Sullivan clandestinely accompanies Baines into the ship to assist in fixing the engine, and together they successfully complete the task. Upon emerging from the ship, they are confronted by Hendricks, who orders them to dismantle the ship and utilize its parts to repair the Sentinel. He refuses to allow them to leave, asserting that their duty is to stay regardless of the expiration of their contract. Sullivan, determined not to meet the same fate as others in the past, resists Hendricks' command, and Baines supports him. However, Cassidy's stance remains uncertain as she joins them in the discussion. Ignoring their disputes, Hendricks compels the team to begin repair work, using his gun as a threatening measure for compliance. The team becomes enraged and apprehensive about Hendricks' recent inclination towards aggression. In response, Cassidy volunteers to engage in a conversation with Hendricks. Cassidy empathetically acknowledges Hendricks' feelings following the loss of his previous squad but asserts that leaving their current situation does not equate to certain death. Instead, it may offer salvation. Meanwhile, Sullivan and Baines contemplate the possibility of having to confront Hendricks in order to achieve their desired objectives. Before their discussion progresses further, Hendricks interrupts and concedes that Cassidy has presented a compelling argument. Considering the absence of communication, someone should report to the base. 2 individuals are designated to remain while the other 2 are to depart. Hendricks asserts his intention to stay, and Cassidy volunteers to remain as well. Baines is content with this outcome, but Sullivan is overcome with sorrow. In a private conversation shortly after, Sullivan pleads with Cassidy to join him, proposing the idea of either replacing Baines or defying Hendricks' orders. In his desperation to ensure Cassidy's happiness, Sullivan even offers to take her place or remain with her. However, Cassidy abruptly reveals that she does not love him and that she had only regarded him as a necessary companion. Distraught, Sullivan hastily leaves the room, and Cassidy succumbs to tears. That night, Sullivan and Baines focus on packing their belongings. Hendricks entrusts Sullivan with a letter to be delivered to the base, reflecting on how the enemy soldiers are similar to them, individuals driven by the desire to protect their homes. Sullivan proposes the idea of leaving together, but Hendricks remains adamant, emphasizing the need for someone to oversee the explosive. Continuing his tasks, Hendricks makes a startling discovery while working on the map and coordinates. The relief ship deliberately changed course, a perplexing action. Growing suspicious, Hendricks hurries to check on Cassidy, but he refrains from uttering a word. The following morning, the team awakens to the blaring alarm as another ship emerges on the radar. The men swiftly assume their positions to defend the Sentinel, while Cassidy attempts to establish contact with the ship without success. This time, Hendricks refuses to send anyone and commands the team to open fire, but their initial shot misses its target. As they prepare to reload, Cassidy notices the absence of their ship, while Sullivan and Baines finally gain a clear view of it as the fog dissipates. Refusing to shoot again, they are too late to react when Cassidy rushes to warn them. Hendricks, having secretly returned the ship to the water, reveals his true intentions by striking Baines with his gun. To demonstrate his resolve, Hendricks shoots the air dancer. Despite the violence, Baines remains steadfast in his refusal to destroy the ship. In response, Hendricks shoots Baines in the ear, prompting Sullivan to take action. He seizes the cannon and destroys the ship before further harm can be done. In a fit of rage, Baines attempts to confront Hendricks, but Cassidy subdues him by striking him with a fire extinguisher. Following this, Sullivan and Cassidy lock Hendricks in the pantry and reclaim both keys. Angered, Baines seeks vengeance against Hendricks and inadvertently strikes Sullivan when he intervenes. Despite Cassidy's attempts to calm him down, Baines chooses to isolate himself and drown his sorrows, unpacking his belongings while shedding tears. Refusing to release Hendricks for his iodine bath, Baines declares his resignation. Sullivan explains to Cassidy that they must exhaust all communication channels on the telegraph until they find one that works. In this moment, Cassidy seizes the opportunity to confess that she didn't truly mean what she said earlier about him. Her intention had been for him to leave without worrying about her, but Sullivan remains hesitant to accept her explanation. Later that afternoon, Sullivan brings food to Hendricks and questions why he had a change of heart about leaving. Hendricks reveals the information he obtained from the coordinates. The relief ship had indeed arrived 3 months ago as planned, but circumstances had compelled it to move away. This revelation suggests the presence of a traitor within their midst who desires the explosive. Sullivan, skeptical of Hendricks' claims, leaves and locks the door behind him. Meanwhile, Sullivan spends the remainder of the day sending SOS messages through every available channel. Baines, consumed by alcohol, attempts to occupy himself in his workshop but eventually succumbs to madness and destroys his creations. In the evening, Cassidy reveals a heartbreaking story to Sullivan, sharing a picture of her family who were killed by the enemy when she was a child. The following morning, Baines discovers Cassidy sleeping in the communications room. He descends into delusion, rambling about a lost future, and attacks Cassidy, creating the appearance of intent to exploit her. Despite the struggle, Cassidy manages to push him away, unaware that Baines has taken the keys. She sets out to find Sullivan to inform him of the incident, but they are interrupted by Baines' voice emanating from the speakers, announcing his intention to activate the explosive. Sullivan and Cassidy hurry back to the communications room, desperately attempting to calm Baines down and reminding him of his family as a reason to keep living. Overwhelmed, Baines steps away from the controls, tearfully confessing that he simply forgot the last digit of the activation code. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Sullivan suggests releasing Hendricks from the pantry. However, Baines reveals shocking news. He had tried to kill Hendricks earlier, but when he entered the pantry, Hendricks was nowhere to be found. An open window indicated that Hendricks had taken his own life. Cassidy and Sullivan are devastated when they verify Baines' claim by checking the pantry. Struggling with their grief, Sullivan reads the letter Hendricks had written to the base, discovering that Hendricks had actually requested an extension of his command. Afterward, Cassidy guides Sullivan to the now clean workshop, where she demonstrates that Baines is recovering and channeling his emotions into building once again. Baines opens up about the heartbreaking truth that his wife was pregnant and he never got the chance to meet their baby. Sullivan, touched by Baines' confession, readily forgives him for his drunken outburst and they share a heartfelt hug. Baines then boards the boat to resume salvaging items from the sea, and Cassidy joins him. Sullivan, concerned for their safety, gives Cassidy a gun for protection, and she expresses her gratitude with a kiss. Shortly thereafter, Sullivan decides to try fishing again. As he pulls up the net, he makes a gruesome discovery: Hendricks' lifeless body with a wound on his head. This revelation confirms that there is indeed a traitor among them. While Sullivan rushes to check his friends' profiles for any potential clues, Cassidy focuses her attention on Baines and the boat, formulating a plan. Sullivan, examining Hendricks' map, starts to develop a theory. Meanwhile, a storm begins to brew, adding to the tension in the air. Sullivan checks the beacon outside and realizes it can be detached and relocated. Someone took the beacon on the boat, leading the ship away from the Sentinel instead of following the intended route. This explains the different coordinates. Furthermore, this person is responsible for killing the relief team and allowing the ship to drift away. After a few hours, only Cassidy returns from the trip, claiming that Baines accidentally fell and died while trying to retrieve some plastic. Sullivan immediately suspects that Cassidy killed him and that she was the traitor all along. However, Sullivan is too afraid to confront her at that moment. The next morning, Cassidy wakes up alone in bed. Sullivan communicates with her only through the walkie-talkie, revealing that he knows she killed everyone and accuses her of spying for the enemy. Sullivan asserts that he won't allow her to have the explosive. Cassidy suddenly realizes that she has misplaced the keys and rushes to the comms room, where she discovers Sullivan in the process of activating the explosive. Sullivan, feeling hopeless about their future, is willing to blow up the Sentinel with both of them inside. Holding Cassidy at gunpoint, Sullivan refuses to believe her explanations about the suffering in her homeland and activates the explosive. However, instead of detonating, the machine displays a whimsical phrase that Baines often repeated. This revelation leads them to understand that Baines had reprogrammed the explosive to prevent it from being used for destruction. In the end, Sullivan and Cassidy engage in a heartfelt conversation. They agree that regardless of which side of the war arrives, they will work together to protect the Sentinel and continue to survive. Thank you for watching our recap. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button and feel free to explore our other recaps.